A night of intense NATO bombardment against military targets in Yugoslavia, and the months of threats and warnings to President Milosevic over Serb action in Kosovo reach an abrupt conclusion. NATO says the bombing will last for several days, and reports are coming in of renewed air raids this morning near Belgrade. Well, hello and welcome to this special edition of The World Today. I'm Stephen Cole. The air raid sirens sounded again this morning in Belgrade as Serbia woke up to a new reality. After days of increasing tension and hopes that a peaceful solution could be found, the Serbs are realizing that their country is now under full-scale attack from NATO. There have been reports of new raids on Belgrade and Pristina. The question now is what effect, if any, the raids will have on President Slobodan Milosevic. So far, there's been no sign of compromise, and the country is officially on a war footing. NATO Secretary-General Javier Solana says the impact of the air attacks is being assessed, but he says the bombing is likely to continue for several days. In total, 8 NATO countries provided firepower for the attacks, which covered a wide area. A large military base near Belgrade was one of the known targets. Explosions are said to have lit up the night sky. The northern city of Novi Sad was also hit, along with the Zastava weapons plant of Kragujevac. In the Kosovo capital, Pristina, there were further reports of loud explosions, but the extent of the damage is still unknown. The attack spread to neighbouring Montenegro, where 2 targets have reportedly been hit. At this stage, there is little independent verification of the success or failure of the NATO strikes. According to the Yugoslav army, 40 targets were hit in 3 hours, including 5 airports, 5 barracks and communications positions. Again, according to the Yugoslav army, the effects were minimal. National television in Belgrade showed pictures of burning buildings throughout the country, but there's little indication of casualties. As for NATO, sources there say an estimated 100 cruise missiles were fired in total, fired from Alliance aircraft carriers in the Adriatic and also from B-52 bombers. According to NATO Secretary-General Javier Solana, the bombing will probably continue for a few days. He also went on to give an explicit aim to the bombing campaign. We want to do away with Yugoslav air defences, he said, with the intention of cutting its air force capacity. Well, in an act of strong protest against NATO action, Russia has recalled its representative at NATO's headquarters in Brussels. President Yeltsin has also warned Washington that it would be held to account for the airstrikes. Our correspondent, Fergus Nichol, has been following the night's attacks, which are the first to be carried out by NATO against a sovereign nation.
After the first night of military operations, NATO commanders are now assessing the degree of success. Planes from 8 NATO countries were involved in the attack, and cruise missiles were fired from US bombers and from ships in the Adriatic. Targets were, as here, in Serbia, in Kosovo itself, and in Montenegro, which with Serbia makes up the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia.
It's obviously early to say this, but from what we can gather, they have been successful. And I'm pleased to say there have been no casualties at all on the NATO side, not just in respect of the British forces, but in respect of the NATO forces as a whole, so that's obviously good news.
We are attacking the military infrastructure of that President Milosevic and his forces are using to repress and kill innocent people. NATO forces are not attacking the people of Yugoslavia. They are attacking the military forces that are responsible for the killing and the carnage in Kosovo.
Russia has taken its outspoken campaign for an end to NATO bombing to the UN Security Council. At an emergency meeting last night, the Russian ambassador said Moscow was profoundly outraged by the airstrikes. The Secretary-General confined himself to expressions of regret.
I speak to you at a grave moment for the international community. Throughout last year, I have appealed on many occasions to the Yugoslav authorities and to the Kosovo Albanians to seek peace over war, compromise over conflict. I deeply regret that in spite of all the efforts made by the international community, the Yugoslav authorities have persisted in their rejection of a political settlement which would have halted the bloodshed in Kosovo and secured an equitable peace for the population. It is indeed tragic that diplomacy has failed.
There's no suggestion that NATO ground forces are to be deployed in this campaign, but they are still active, patrolling the border between Kosovo and the neighbouring former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The NATO Secretary-General Javier Solana said today that strikes against Yugoslavia's air defences will probably continue for a few days. Fergus Nichol, BBC News.
Let's go to Brussels and defence correspondent Mark Laity. Mark, NATO must consider the first set of raids a success, do they?
Yes, it looks like they do. I mean, all the indications were that with good weather and a strong first strike that they had to be reasonably successful. As we heard from Tony Blair, the initial indications are that the attacks have been pretty successful. But I mean, these are early days. There's always a great impatience to know exactly what's happened. But if people think back to the experience of Operation Desert Fox, the attacks on Iraq, it took some days for them to declare they'd been partially successful, and then a few weeks later they came out and said they'd been more successful than they'd said. So it is a difficult process, this, but it does look pretty good for NATO at the moment, and obviously a lot of pleasure at the fact that they all got back without any losses at all.
And relief that no planes were lost.
Yes, absolutely. But it's not over. I mean, the fact that they've done one night against the Serb air defences and got away with it does not mean that the Serb air defences are now in ruins. The system itself has got a lot of redundancy built in, that alternative lines of communication, if you take out a command and control centre, a lot of missiles weren't used, they can repair things. I don't think we've seen the end of the Serb air defences by any means. And one would...
Whether or not that was in fact a bomb or another raid?
Well, what I can tell you is that the air raid sirens have once again sounded over Belgrade in the last hour or so. We are receiving reports that the airfield to the north of the city has once again come under attack. There are Serb media reports, government reports, but I can't confirm that independently. Equally, I hear the reports which you're referring to there, and I can't confirm those either. But what I can tell you is that the air raid sirens and the realization that these raids are ongoing is causing an even greater sense of tension here in the Serbian capital. A lot of people very angry, very, very frustrated that their city is now under attack by NATO warplanes.
We said at the beginning of this program, Jeremy, that Belgrade was waking up, Serbia was waking up to a new reality this morning. Is that right?
It is, yes. I think most people here have grown accustomed to threats and ultimatums from the West, and they're used to their leaders, Slobodan Milosevic, going up to the wire and then stepping back at the last moment. And I think that most people here simply assume that that may well be the case again in this scenario. So I think even yesterday, the feeling in Belgrade was a very relaxed one. It was very much life as normal for most people. But that all changed with the coming of the dusk yesterday. As it got darker in the skies, the mood got altogether more gloomy. There was no sense that there was going to be a diplomatic breakthrough. And when the raids did finally come and we saw the flash of explosions and saw the tracer fire light up the sky over Belgrade, I think in the end it came as no great surprise, but it did result in some degree of shock and certainly a lot of anger directed towards the NATO countries.
Jeremy Cook in Belgrade, thanks to you. Let's go back to NATO.
We understand the position of Russia. I want to speak to the Russian Prime Minister, Mr. Primakov, at some point in time today. And we understand their concerns, but the very reason we're taking action is to prevent a humanitarian disaster in Kosovo and to prevent the conflict in Kosovo then spreading to the whole of the Balkans. Now, we've been in this position before. We understand the objections that Russia have. We're sensitive to what they're saying, but we really believe we have no alternative but to act in the interests both of humanity and in the wider strategic interests of the region.
British Prime Minister Tony Blair talking this morning. We are getting so far unconfirmed reports that Yugoslavia is saying more than 10 civilians were killed in the NATO airstrikes. Let's go to Moscow and our correspondent Robert Path. Relief that the first bombardment, the first set of strikes went well, I suppose.
Yes, there's great relief here that the first night is over. That was always going to be the most difficult as far as NATO was concerned. They were very worried about the Serbian air defences. They knew they were reasonably sophisticated. But I think the feeling here now is that they've done a great deal of damage to diminish Serbian air defences, that they are less of a threat as a result of last night's bombardments, and now the operation can move on tonight to a new level, concentrating on Serbian military targets in and around Belgrade, and also, of course, in Kosovo itself. The whole aim of this mission, they said, is to get the Serbian air defences out of the way and to concentrate on that whole idea of diminishing, or to use the term they always use, degrading the Serbian military machine.
As you know, and from the Gulf War too, air defences can soak up an awful lot of punishment. So this is not going to be a quick operation, is it?
No, and they're certainly not taking anything for granted here either about the Serbian air defences. There is a bit of a pause in the operation now. That's because they're examining hundreds, if not many, many hundreds of satellite photos which have been taken both during the night because it was a clear night, there was no cloud cover, and now, of course, in the beautiful sunlight we've got here of former Yugoslavia. They're examining the photos to see the damage that was done to those Serbian air defences and to see whether or not they need to go back and hit them again this evening.
There have also been reports, Jonathan, of new raids this morning in Belgrade. Do you know anything about that?
I don't specifically, because NATO are being very clear they won't comment until the whole operation is over, each stage of the operation is over. They don't comment as it's happening. But I think it's fair to say that during this daylight there won't be aircraft missions, but what there will be are further cruise missile attacks. Certainly NATO sources are saying you can expect wave after wave of cruise missile attacks. We can do those in daylight. For air operations, though, we would prefer to do them at night. It is much safer for the pilots.
Jonathan Charles, many thanks, Jonathan. Just to sum up what we've been hearing, there have been new air raids, the reports of anyway, new air raids.
Good morning, you're with Euronews. We're giving you regular updates on the Kosovo bombardments. Reports are coming in that there have been fresh attacks against military sites in Serbia this morning. The independent television station Studio B says tremors were felt in Belgrade shortly after air raid sirens sounded in the city. The airport at Batajnica in the northwest has reportedly been hit. Within the last few minutes, 4 French planes have reportedly taken off from Istrana Air Base in Italy.
Sirens wailed throughout Yugoslavia in the early evening yesterday, signalling the start of NATO's military campaign against the Yugoslav army. The alliance used warplanes stationed in Italy and Britain and launched cruise missiles from ships based in the Adriatic. As soon as the raid began, Belgrade declared a state of war. Overnight in Kosovo itself, the capital Pristina was plunged into darkness with only burning buildings lighting up the sky. Powerful explosions rocked Belgrade and the northern Serb town of Novi Sad. US defense officials say crucial missile batteries, radar communications and military airports were all hit. There were also coordinated airstrikes against Serbia's sister republic Montenegro. The Yugoslav news agency Tanjug reported airstrikes in 7 towns. The Yugoslav army claims NATO jets struck 40 targets overnight, including 5 airports, 5 barracks and storage depots during 3 hours of bombing. Earlier it indicated an unspecified number of women and children who'd been staying in military housing were killed. But it now says the effects of the mass actions have been minimal for installations and personnel, and morale is high following Slobodan Milosevic's call for strength and solidarity. British, French and German aircraft took part in the raids. It was Germany's first offensive armed action since the Second World War. The extent of the damage remains unclear, but China and Russia have renewed their condemnation of the attacks in the wake of these Serb television pictures of victims at a hospital in Belgrade. Meanwhile, Italian troops have been mobilized to strengthen Kosovo's border with Macedonia. If the airstrikes fail to resolve the conflict and bring the Serbs back to the negotiating table, this could be a crucial flashpoint for combat with retreating ground forces.
Shortly after the bombing started, Serb President Slobodan Milosevic declared a state of war. He remains defiant in the face of a huge international offensive. He accused the USA of neo-Nazi policies. He said the criminal and vicious attacks against them prove that Yugoslavia is up against fascists. He said the Serbs will win the war, urging his people to stand firm despite the NATO airstrikes. But international leaders are showing no signs of backing down. German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder said Milosevic is waging a war without pity.
Präsident Milosevic führt dort einen erbarmungslosen Krieg.
He accused the Serb president's army of carrying out a terrorist war against the majority of Albanians in Kosovo.
Allen Warnungen zum Trotz verschärft.
American President Bill Clinton spelt out the aim of the strikes. He says it's their moral obligation to change Serb policies over Kosovo.
Our mission is clear: to demonstrate the seriousness of NATO's purpose so that the Serbian leaders understand the imperative of reversing course, to deter an even bloodier offensive against innocent civilians in Kosovo, and if necessary, to seriously damage the Serbian military's capacity to harm the people of Kosovo.
The Secretary-General of NATO, Javier Solana, spared a thought for the innocent people in Yugoslavia. He pointed the finger at just one person.
We have no quarrel with the people of Yugoslavia, who for too long have been isolated in Europe because of the policies of their government. Our actions are directed against the repressive policy of the Yugoslav leadership.
Meanwhile, his UN counterpart Kofi Annan says he understands military action, but he wasn't happy that it was used.
I have many times pointed out, not just in relation to Kosovo, that under the Charter, the Security Council has primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. And this is explicitly acknowledged in the North Atlantic Treaty.
With resolve so high, the strength of force against Milosevic could risk a stronger drive by the Serbs to hold on to what they believe is their homeland. President Boris Yeltsin has suspended Russian cooperation with NATO following the airstrikes against the Serbs. Mr. Yeltsin said he was deeply shocked by the decision to bomb Yugoslavia. He's called an emergency meeting with the UN Security Council. The Russian representative at NATO headquarters has been called home. Yeltsin called on world leaders to urge Clinton to reconsider, saying he was making a grave mistake.
Убедим Клинтона не делать этого трагического, драматического шага.
Moscow is against the use of force against its traditional Serb ally. Russia says it retains the right to take military measures to defend itself if the conflict spread. This is the first time since the start of the Kosovo crisis it's threatened to put its army to task outside Russia. Yeltsin signed up to a NATO accord in 1997. French President Jacques Chirac and his American counterpart Bill Clinton telephoned him yesterday before the bombing, but it looks like attempts to keep him on side have failed.
Overnight, around 100 people gathered outside the US Embassy in Rome to voice their opposition to the strikes. Similar demonstrations were staged in Moscow, outside the US and British embassies there. And in London, several hundred people gathered to voice their anger near Prime Minister Blair's office in Downing Street. Across the Atlantic, anti-NATO protesters, including many Serb immigrants, staged this demonstration in New York.
Thousands of miles away.
On the opposite side of the street, about 50 people demonstrated in support of the air raids. Brandishing the Albanian flag, they called for an end to the genocide in Kosovo.
NATO's attack on Yugoslav sites is the first offensive action against a sovereign nation in the organization's 50-year history. In the past, it's taken on more of a caretaker role, like in the Bosnian War. Since threatening Yugoslavia since last October, then, there's been widespread dispute on whether NATO's role should be so offensive. The alliance began with 14 countries. That tally went up to 19 last Tuesday. 13 are taking part in the current airstrikes. It's difficult to know whether on signing the North Atlantic Treaty in 1949, action like that in Yugoslavia was foreseen. The original aim was a common interest in maintaining peace and defending freedoms through political solidarity and adequate military defense to deter and repel aggression against the members. Their obvious concern was the Soviet Union. Now that the threats of the Cold War are over, NATO has been trying to find a role for itself. Yugoslavia has accused the organization of trying to prove the need for its continued existence by attacking Serb territory. The alliance says Serb actions are destabilizing the Balkans, and NATO's role is to establish a just and lasting peaceful order in Europe.
A number of options.
General Wesley Clark, NATO's supreme commander, has been given a free rein to conduct the campaign. Many are questioning whether NATO has the right to attack a sovereign country when its members aren't directly menaced. The long-threatened airstrikes prove the alliance's much-questioned resolve to use force if necessary, but many believe airstrikes are simply a display of power.
Aeroporto e centrale elettrica, la gente è chiusa in casa, manca luce e acqua. La stampa è stata invitata a lasciare il paese. Questa mattina le sirene hanno ripreso a suonare anche a Belgrado, è stato nuovamente colpito l'aeroporto e postazioni alla periferia della capitale. In Jugoslavia vige la legge marziale, ci sono molti problemi per le comunicazioni, molti giornalisti sono stati espulsi. A Bruxelles intanto la NATO è riunita per valutare la situazione, confermano che tutti gli aerei impegnati sono rientrati alla base. Il segretario generale Solana ha già detto che i raid andranno avanti ancora per qualche giorno, contrariamente a quanto si diceva ieri. L'ambasciatore russo ha detto di non essere stato richiamato da Mosca, mentre da Washington Clinton ribadisce l'inevitabilità dell'intervento. Yeltsin chiede una riunione d'urgenza del gruppo di contatto e dice che presenterà alle Nazioni Unite una mozione di condanna degli attacchi della NATO. Intanto al confine tra Kosovo e Albania sono segnalati scontri, i serbi hanno sparato colpi di mortaio contro un villaggio albanese. A Berlino il programma della conferenza economica dei 15 è stato sconvolto dalla crisi jugoslava, è stata interrotta per dar modo ai ministri di Francia, Germania e Italia di riunirsi per evitare, hanno detto fonti diplomatiche, che i bombardamenti contro Belgrado rimangano fini a se stesso. Gli aggiornamenti nelle prossime edizioni, il telegiornale 3 torna alle 14 come sempre. Buona giornata da Milano.
A été sérieuse.
Il a été observé une certaine pugnacité, voire une pugnacité certaine, en termes de défense aérienne et solaire.
Après les frappes de cette nuit, aucun bilan des résultats enregistrés que par l'OTAN, mais la télévision serbe montre des blessés soignés d'urgence dans les hôpitaux du pays. Belgrade annonce 10 soldats tués et 27 blessés. Ce matin, les appareils ont de nouveau décollé de leur base italienne, sans qu'on sache encore s'il s'agit vraiment de nouvelles frappes ou tout simplement de vols de reconnaissance pour mesurer l'efficacité des bombardements de la nuit dernière ou préparer ceux de ce soir.
À présent, rendons...
Véritablement la panique, ils s'attendaient à ce que les événements se précipitent. Depuis aujourd'hui, j'ai quand même le sentiment que la tension a grimpé d'un cran, parce que maintenant ils savent que, ça y est, on y est maintenant. Ça a changé depuis hier, ils savent qu'il y a eu des objectifs de toucher tout près de Belgrade, alors c'est vrai qu'on est un peu plus nerveux. On est un peu plus nerveux, on est en attente parce que les gens se disent que probablement la campagne de bombardement va être assez longue. Alors on se demande si ce sang-froid qui est remarquable pour l'instant, si ce sang-froid va être le même encore demain.
Mais Mona, nous...
Les Serbes refoulent systématiquement les équipes de journalistes qui tentent de passer. Plus loin, sur les collines environnantes, des soldats serbes patrouillent pour empêcher tout mouvement entre les deux pays. Pendant ce temps, à Skopje, la capitale de la Macédoine, on suit de très près la situation au Kosovo. Ce matin, toute la presse ne parle que des raids de la nuit dernière sur la Yougoslavie. Les bombardements de l'OTAN ont certainement réjoui les réfugiés albanais qui vivent ici, des réfugiés albanais arrivés par milliers ces derniers jours et qui attendent d'être fixés sur leur sort.
Les réactions à présent, à commencer par celle de la Russie. Pour Boris Yeltsin, l'Amérique devra répondre de sa faute. Il étudie d'ailleurs en ce moment plusieurs mesures extrêmes, ce sont les termes du Kremlin. De son côté, le président américain Bill Clinton a pris le temps d'expliquer à la télévision les objectifs, les raisons de ces bombardements de l'OTAN. Zidine Boudaoud.
Derrière son bureau ovale de la Maison-Blanche, le président des États-Unis se fait professeur d'histoire-géographie. Il explique à ses élèves, les citoyens américains, le bien fondé des frappes militaires en Yougoslavie. Bill Clinton se veut pédagogue. La Première Guerre mondiale a commencé à Sarajevo, a-t-il expliqué, et dans la Seconde Guerre mondiale, l'Europe et les États-Unis avaient été lents à intervenir. Aussi, l'action de l'OTAN est indispensable pour désamorcer une poudrière au cœur de l'Europe, a poursuivi Bill Clinton.
Les futures générations d'Américains n'auront pas à traverser à nouveau l'Atlantique pour combattre dans une autre guerre terrible. C'est ce défi que les Alliés et nous devons relever au Kosovo. C'est pour ça que nous agissons maintenant.
Mais la leçon n'a toujours pas convaincu Boris Yeltsin. Pour le président russe, Bill Clinton devra rendre des comptes pour son rôle dans le déclenchement des frappes. Mais il exclut des mesures extrêmes, c'est-à-dire militaires, en réponse à l'offensive de l'OTAN. Boris Yeltsin a chargé son...
facilities associated with military units directly involved in aggression within Kosovo. And the map, which you can see on my right, shows the location of United Kingdom Tomahawk and Harrier GR7 targets. Turning to the detail of the United Kingdom involvement, HMS Splendid fired its Tomahawk missiles against a key military radar facility located near Pristina Airfield in Kosovo. This facility, comprising 2 highly capable air defense radars and an associated control building, was capable of providing extensive data to Yugoslavian air defense forces, fighter aircraft, surface-to-air missile units, and anti-aircraft artillery. The control center was also capable of correlating data from a number of subordinate radars and distributing this throughout the National Air Defense Network for use by other units and to help build up the national air picture. Clearly, such a capability posed a serious threat to NATO manned aircraft, and it was vital, therefore, that it was put out of action.